Welcome back. We know convicted ex-police officer Derek Chauvin will be sentenced in about 8 weeks for the murder of George Floyd, convicted on all counts. But how much freedom does Judge Cahill have with the sentencing here? So we brought in our own judge, our favorite judge, to get perspective on the case. Welcome back to the show, Judge Glenda Hatchett. Good morning, Judge. If ever a day that we needed to see you, and get your insight, that is this morning. We're hearing all kinds of things as lay people, 40 years on this account, up to 25, up to 10. What will this judge do? What can he do? Can you unpack the sentencing and how you as a judge arrive at that decision?
Yes. In Minnesota, first of all, judges have a great deal of discretion. And so when you see the maximum sentence on the second degree murder charge, people think, oh my goodness, well, he's going to go to jail. He's going to go to jail for this long time. But that is not what happens. In fact, 40 years is the first. You just talked about the levels. It is very unlikely that they will not be served concurrently. In other words, I think that they will probably be together as opposed to stacked. So it won't be 45, 25, 10, but rather a concurrent sentence. That's number one. But it is also very important that when they left the courtroom yesterday, the judge talked about a PSI. What that means is a pre-sentence investigation. So he will get input on the fact that Chauvin doesn't have a prior record. He will get other factors in that report before he sentences in 8 weeks. But what does that mean as a practical matter? And this is where I think people are going to be very upset, because he could sentence Chauvin to 12.5 years. And there's a very complicated grid that I've been studying about the sentencing and how it could work. He could sentence him up to the maximum. We could see that. We could see that in this case. I don't think he will do the 12.5 just because there's been so much scrutiny on this case. Now, the other factor, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but the other factor very quickly is that the prosecution has moved the court to add aggravated circumstances. What does that mean? That means that the judge can take in other factors and add more time to the sentence. He can't go above the maximum, but he could get very close to it. Now, Chauvin waived his right to a jury trial on that particular matter and has asked the judge to do that part of the sentencing. So there's a lot that's going to be going on. There's going to be a lot of speculation over these 8 weeks, but I want to be clear that it doesn't automatically mean that Chauvin is going to get the maximum number of years. It's a tweak in the law. He committed one crime of murder, but 3 counts, if that makes sense. And I know that seems a little strange to put it that way, but that's the way the law reads in the situation. One crime,
Judge Hatchett,
murder,
we've seen this before, actually, and this is part of the issue that we've had in our community for so long. We've actually gotten convictions over the years, especially in the 50s and 60s, and then you had a judge that said, okay, well, I'm going to slap them on the hand, I'm going to give them probation or something like that. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure on Judge Cahill to add to that sentence and make sure he has a long stay in prison. So when it comes to these types of cases, as a judge, do you feel that pressure because the nation is watching you and they want a long sentence?
I think that Cahill is under pressure, but his oath requires that he not be swayed by it. But we're all human beings, Mike, in these situations. And I can't imagine that Cahill, under these circumstances, given the horrible disregard that Chauvin had for George Floyd's life, could impose a minimum sentence. I just don't see that happening. Do I see the maximum happening? I'm not clear that he will go to the maximum. And what will happen, I know I keep putting these footnotes in here, but this is very important. Mike, if they have a stiff sentence they're going to appeal regardless of the sentence. We know that's going to
Right.
happen. Then what may happen is that they will go up on appeal and then try to negotiate down the sentence with the prosecutors. I think the prosecutors will be under tremendous scrutiny not to enter into any kind of deal to reduce that sentence. And ultimately, it will be the judge's final decision. You can plea out, try to negotiate with the prosecutors all day long, but ultimately the judge will have the final say on that sentence.
Wow, Judge, you know, we know you in this town and beyond. You were revered on the bench, and this may be unfair, but I want to know what Judge Glenda Hatchett would be doing in these 8 weeks. I want to know what you would decide for this officer. You watched this trial probably more than anybody else I know. What would you do?
Honestly, Sharon, I would really be moving toward the maximum sentence in this case. And let me tell you why. Even after the colleague said there's no pulse, he did nothing. When you could have rolled him over to his side to give him an opportunity to breathe, the paramedics had to literally tap him on the shoulder to get him to remove his knee after George Floyd was lifeless, wasn't breathing. They knew that he was in crisis. You call the ambulance, fine. But then you still continue to put pressure. This man was not a threat to anyone. And bystanders are pleading. A 9-year-old child is pleading. Everybody knows that this is a problem. He's picking pebbles out of the tire. He has his hands in his pocket nonchalantly. He knows that he's being filmed. He knows that they have vest cams on. He knows that people are going to see this. But there is an air of kind of a, not only arrogance, but disregard for human life that says, I don't care. And with that disregard for life, George Floyd could have been saved even after the knee incident had he responded to the fellow officer, rolled him over on his side, gotten the pressure off of him, and gotten him the treatment. He didn't offer any life-saving support for that man, and he was required to do that. So if I were on the bench, Sharon, to answer your question succinctly, it would be right at the maximum, because I would want to send a message that this is unacceptable, that this is a problem in America, and you cannot get away with this any longer.
I think that has to happen, though, right, Judge? That message has to be sent that you're not going to get away with this, and you're going to be severely punished.
There's a whole thing, and I know we don't have time to get into it today, that we need to talk about this whole issue of what the Supreme Court decisions have meant historically. You all know that I take this very personally because I believe in this work, but I also represented Philando Castile in Minnesota. There had never been an indictment of a police officer in the history of the state until I just pressed for it. But my point is that because there is such a pervasive attitude, and there's this blue shield of silence and the Supreme Court's decisions dating back to the 80s, where you have qualified immunity and too many officers are protected by that. And so there is so much work to do. And I have to say, Sharon and Mike, I have to say this, that although I am very pleased with this verdict, this is not the solution. This is justice in one case, but this is not the solution in this country. I just got an email this morning from the forensic pathologist in the Philando case, and he's asking me to sign on to a letter really criticizing the former Maryland Maryland medical examiner who testified in this case.
Oh,
Until
yeah.
we all decide that there's a continuum of how this has to happen, medical examiners, prosecutors, police, citizens, we are not there. An important step, but the work is far, far, far from over.
Absolutely, just a step and a long road towards the justice. And that Maryland medical examiner also involved in a lawsuit covering up another case involving the police, on siding with the police, and he was still able to testify in this case. That shouldn't happen. Judge Hatchett, we love you. Yeah. You're always welcome on the show. We need you, and we'll definitely be talking to you down the road. Thanks for starting your day with us yet again.
I appreciate you all being on it and really staying on these important issues, because the public has to be informed. So thank you. Anytime, you know where to find me.
Yeah, thank you, Judge. And I hope your family's doing well. I know you haven't had it easy. Absolutely. So thank you so much.